Emovis Ireland is a leading provider of mobility-based solutions. They make the complicated easy because they believe in the freedom of going places. And today we're going to meet Eoin Gillard. Eoin is the head of public transport investment for the NTA. Well, Eoin, thanks for joining us on Going Places today on the upper deck of our private bus.
Yes.
Not so bad. Have you ever travelled like this before?
No, not on a private bus.
And we didn't pay our fare either.
No.
So many people will have heard of the NTA, but can you tell us specifically, because there's a lot of different stakeholders involved in transport, what the role of the NTA is?
Okay, so the NTA is the National Transport Authority. So in short terms, what we do is we plan transport, we manage transport, we contract transport services, and then we deliver infrastructure around transport. So maybe looking at those in a little bit more detail. Strategic planning is sort of, I suppose, the genesis of everything in that context, and we have responsibility in the GDA and then the other 4 regional cities for the strategic planning of transport. So that's taking the long-term view and seeing where population and employment is going to be and trying to understand what sort of transport system we require to meet the demands of the travelling public. So that's sort of the cornerstone of everything that we do from there. So going on to that then, we have the different transport operators, so we contract those to provide the services that we have. So for example, last year we had 290 million passengers on bus, light rail across the services that we contract. On top of that then, we also regulate the industry, so we have licensing for private bus operators, we have licensing for public bus operators, and then we also have things like the regulation of taxis and parking. We manage those services then once we've contracted them, so we try and ensure that the people that we have providing the service are meeting the standards that we require in terms of on time, reliability, journey times, and the general customer experience. And then coming into that, we have the delivery of transport infrastructure, and that's sort of the area where I'm involved in public transport investment. So that's looking at, you have your big projects, your Metrolink, Bus Connects, DART expansion, but we also purchase bus fleet, and then we look at smaller interventions around the city on walking, cycling, and other aspects of active travel. So that's really
It's really wide-ranging, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And there's a lot within that. When you talk about public transport, and you mentioned some huge numbers there, the numbers went up quite significantly last year by an extra 24 million people using public transport in Ireland. What were the main reasons for that? Yeah,
look, there's sort of myriad reasons for it, because if we look at growth over the last 10 years, the NTA didn't exist in 2009. It was formed in 2009. So a lot has happened in those 10 years, including a significant economic downturn. But investments were made in 2009, 2010, 2011 in Lewis extensions. There was the introduction of the Leap card, the introduction of real-time passenger information, and then there was more integration of services, and new services have been put on. So we now have 24-hour bus services on the 15, the 14. We have 24-hour bus services in Cork. We've a 10-minute DART service. The Phoenix Park Tunnel was opened, Lewis Cross City was opened. So there's been lots of different contributors to that. And fundamentally, growth has returned as well. So there's more people in employment, there's more people living in our country, so there's a greater demand for the services that we provide. So all those things combined have contributed to what we see, a 9% growth in the passenger numbers on those services.
And as those demands grow, how do you feel the demand is being met?
Well, at the moment we're really struggling to meet the demand. The growth is sort of happening a bit quicker than we can keep up in terms of infrastructure improvements. There's a couple of reasons for that. Again, the planning of these systems takes a long time. Delivering major pieces of infrastructure takes between about 8 to 15 years, depending on the type of intervention you're making. So you need to be planning an intervention that you want to open in 15 years' time now. Okay. So we need to be thinking 15 years ahead of ourselves and trying to get the funding and trying to get the planning and then constructing. So at the moment on a lot of these schemes, we're still at the planning stage. So it's going to take time to get that planning and get the construction commenced to meet the demand. In the short term, we are doing other things to try and expand the capacity of the existing system. So we've purchased new rail fleet that's due to be delivered. We're extending the Lewis Green Line trams. We're trying to extract more bus services, introduce new bus services to meet parts of the demand that aren't currently being met. So.
Let's talk about Bus Connect then.
Yeah.
We've heard a fair bit about it. Can you give us more detail on because it's a National Transport Authority initiative,
Yes,
what
yeah.
exactly it entails?
Well, in simplest terms, Bus Connect is something that's seeking to transform the bus system, providing better bus services to more people. So that's really the fundamental principle. So it's made up of a number of different parts, really. There's the concept of a network redesign. So at the moment, the buses, it's hard to understand the bus system. You know, you could be on the 15 and that goes somewhere, but the 14 goes somewhere completely different, and then the 83 is on the north side and then it's on the south side. So it's understanding the system and does it cover the areas that it needs to cover. So that network redesign is a key component, and that's gone through 2 rounds of public consultation to see what are the services that people need, how have they reacted to it. We got a huge volume of responses to that, sort of 50,000 responses to the public consultation. So people are really interested in the bus system and the network that will serve them. The network is only as good as the infrastructure it runs on, though, and at the moment we see that bus doesn't get the priority it needs to deliver that reliability and on-time service that people expect out of the network, and that will incentivise people to switch from car to bus. So the next element is putting in priority for buses along core bus corridors. So continuous priority or priority at signals to make sure that we can deliver the services and the journey times that people expect. Another key component of it is next generation ticketing. So revising the fare structure to make it cheaper for people to use the system, and also that they don't get the penalty when they get from one bus to the other, that they're charged twice for their trip. But moving from Leap Card has been a huge success, and there's hundreds of thousands of Leap Cards in circulation. But we're now looking to move to an account-based ticketing system, which is very similar to what they have in London, where you can effectively pay for any sort of transport using your phone or using a tap-on card or whatever it might be, and that it would charge you that way. So simplifying how people can use the system. And then along with that then we have new buses. So at the moment the entire fleet is a diesel fleet. We bought 9 hybrid buses last year, but obviously with climate action, with the need to respond to the decarbonisation of transport, we need to change the type of bus that's out there. So where it's moving to a low emission or zero emission bus fleet as part of that Bus Connect programme. There's other elements like stop infrastructure, interchange facilities, and then bus-based park and ride, which all contribute to it. So it's really a portfolio or programme of multiple different projects all coming together to deliver a much better bus system and to increase the coverage where people can access this bus system.
And it was decided in 2019 that would need to be on a phased approach?
Yes, yeah.
Was it on a needs basis, or what was the thinking behind that?
Well, it was. I suppose the initial planning was one of the options was to do it as a sort of overnight implementation, but fundamentally that would have only been on the network redesign and not the infrastructure. The infrastructure obviously couldn't be done by flicking a switch overnight. I think as the public consultation went on and we considered how practicable it was to sort of do an overnight switch, going from the numbers that we have at the moment on the bus routes, where they go, what they serve, to then changing people's behaviours and patterns and saying, well, you're now on the H-spine and the H-spine will bring you from A to B, that actually it was probably maybe a bit too much for the travelling public to switch overnight like that. So now it's a more targeted approach, and we'll do quadrants of the city almost in introducing the new services, with the first spines looking to roll out towards the end of this year.
Okay, let's talk about the much talked about Metrolink or Metro North. It's been talked about and planned for a long time, and it finally will be. Construction begins in 2021. With the joining up of the Lewis, with the Red Line and the Green Line, and Dublin's current infrastructure, is it still as important as ever that Metro North Metrolink goes ahead?
Well, it really is. I spoke about earlier the role of strategic planning. So in the Greater Dublin area, the NTA have a transport strategy from 2016 to 2035. And what that is an integrated transport system to service the demands of Dublin. And it's built off key corridors and spines which the public transport system can operate on. And the north-south main spine is Metrolink connecting into the Lewis Green Line, and that's a really important connection. I noticed yesterday TomTom published their congestion index for traffic.
Yes, so where does Dublin rank in Europe?
I think they were, well, I don't know where it ranked, I think it was 17th in the world.
Sixth in Europe.
Sixth in Europe.
For the second year in a row.
I looked at the top 10 roads in Dublin for congestion. They had Drumcondra Road Upper, they had Dorset Street, they had North King Street, they had Bolton Street, they had Church Street.
Okay.
All of those streets are on the Metro North corridor, or the Metrolink corridor. And so it is needed as much as ever. It's servicing a key transport corridor. It's servicing Dublin Airport. Swords is looking to grow to a population of 100,000. There's huge demand there for growth and existing services at the moment. So it really is, it's one of the key elements of the integrated transport strategy that we're trying to implement.
And I guess ultimately very important that it is seen through to the end as well and finally happens.
Very, very much so. The previous scheme was a victim of the economic downturn, and I suppose, as I said before, you're looking at 8 to 15 years for implementing these large schemes. Unfortunately, that can carry you through 3 economic cycles, it can carry you through 4 or 5 political cycles. So delivering these big transport schemes, they do need a strong commitment, and they need that commitment to be continued through. And you know, while the short-term impact might be significant, the long-term benefits really shouldn't be underestimated.
And also the commitment, and you touched on sustainability, the commitment to more eco-friendly modes of travel is there and in place from the public and the authorities. How do you incentivise, with all that in mind, the public to use more public transport?
I think fundamentally you have to have a customer-centric view or a people-centric view of the services you're providing. We could provide all the services in the world, but if they're not taking people from A to B in the manner with which they need to do it, well then they're not going to meet the demand and they're not going to use them. So we need to gain a really strong understanding of what people's needs are, how they need to travel, when they need to travel, why they need to travel, and then develop an integrated system around that. There's a view that maybe car should be banned completely, but that's not really the view, because people need cars to make certain types of trips. Urban transport versus rural transport, and it's about integrating public transport into the wider system and making sure that people can use it. So the way we encourage it is by providing the best service, and sometimes that has to take account of the fact that it's when you go to use your car, you walk out your front door, you get in your car, you drive out your driveway, and you go to where you want to go. When you want to use a bus, you probably have to walk 500 metres to a kilometre to get on that bus, and then when you get to the end of your trip, you might have to do another walk. So the public transport system is reliant then on the walking and cycling system and getting you to and from the service that you need. Sometimes you might have to get a bus to get to the high capacity metro. So we need to consider the entirety of that trip and not just say, we've got a high capacity, high quality corridor here if no one can access it, and we haven't thought about the walking, cycling and other facilities needed to get what they call the first mile and last mile trip done.
And when you talk about people then who live outside urban areas, who would feel that their car is their only way of getting to where they need to be, how do you incentivise those to be encouraged to use more sustainable transport?
Well, I think again it is really looking at it. A lot of the time the focus is on commuter trips, and if we just focused on commuter trips, we don't fully understand the needs that people have. So a lot of people might travel into the city centre by car for work, but they probably have dropped off children on the way. On the way home, they might not be going directly home. So even if we provided a high capacity A to B link for them that got them right from their door, right to their door of work, it mightn't actually work for them. So again, it's about understanding what their needs are and then providing the services that can support them. So actually the thing that might free up them from using their car is providing a service that brings their kids to school.
Gotcha.
So it's about looking at those more local, more community-based services that can help address that need. And then someone goes, well, now actually I can use the Dart expansion out to Drogheda because I now no longer have to drop my kids off to my grandparents or to their school on the way there. So again, it's really trying to match the transport system to the needs of people. So it's not about encouraging them, it's actually providing a service and the option of them having a service that works for them.
Okay. And in your own role in the NTA, is that an element of it that gives you, I guess, joy? Is the problem solving, the fixing the puzzle, or at least coming up with the solutions to it, and then trying to get everyone on board to implement it?
Well, that's it. Like I've lived in Dublin all my life, and I've lived in Ireland all my life, and I want to see good solutions applied to the place that makes it a better place to live, a better quality of life for people. And I think transport, people are now understanding the role that transport has to play in quality of life. So it's not just about pushing people around the place or making cars go faster, but it's actually about giving people a better quality of life. And that's where I think the sort of enjoyment in the role comes, where you're actually saying, well, we've planned something for 8 to 15 years and it's now come into fruition. I worked on the Lewis Cross City scheme for pretty much 10 years of my working career, and to see that up and running and to see demand, you know, the thing bulging at its seams with people using it, you're sort of going, well, this has been a successful intervention and it's making a difference to people. And yeah, it is something that has a little bit of a reward at the end of it. You wouldn't do it otherwise.
You obviously need a lot of patience as well. People want instant gratification and instant results these days. You're playing the long game.
And that's it. And I think, you know, when you think about delivering roads and delivering public transport, for the reasons I mentioned, everyone almost has a road going to their house. And you deliver a road and people can instantly access it and use it. But public transport is a little bit more nuanced, because you have to create the connectivity to the public transport, then you have to match the service. So how frequent does that bus need to be for it to be suitable for people to use it, or for it desirable for people to use it? So if you put on a service that's only half an hour, every half an hour, maybe no one will use it. But if you have it every 5 minutes, people will really want to use it. But then, can we facilitate that? Do we have the buses to do it? Do we have the infrastructure to do it, to create a reliable service? Whereas you open a road and someone just gets in their car and drives in it, and it takes as long as it takes, and they're sort of happy. So it can be a bit more challenging to sort of say, well, why can't you do this straight away? There is a few things that all have to come together.
As you're painting those pictures there, I don't know if this is just me, but I'm picturing like the Sims transport game. You know, and you have that top-down view of your city and how it all connects up and the frequency of services and the like. It's a real-life version of that.
It really is, and the cornerstone to it, again, coming back to that strategic planning, we need to put people, jobs and residents in places where they can be accessed by public transport. So one of the difficulties that Dublin and Ireland has had is the low density of development and the distance away from the core centres that development is happening. Public transport needs critical mass for it to be viable and successful. So you need to put the people where you can access it, you need to put the jobs where you can access them. So NTA also have a land use planning function, and they influence the national planning framework and the regional, spatial and economic strategies to try and ensure that where the population and employment is targeted for, that the transport can be provided to service that demand as well. And we're playing a little bit of catch up on that at the moment, because we have seen development in the commuter belt, and that's harder to serve by public transport, and it's expensive to serve by public transport. the desire now within the national planning framework is for more compact growth, which means if there's more people within 30 minutes of the city centre, that means you can have higher capacity, more frequent services servicing them. If you're living an hour's or an hour and a half away and a bus route is taking that long, it's much harder to sort of operate those systems in an efficient way.
Okay. Well, before we finish on, and it's been a brilliant chat, very informative and enlightening, we grant all our guests one wish.
Oh yeah.
And when they, and I know you've seen this, so when you look and you wave the magic wand and you can solve one issue that's important to you or to transport in the country, what would you solve if we could just wave that wand now?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And despite the fact that I've seen previous episodes, I didn't prepare for it in any way. So I think, one of the big challenges is getting the schemes to planning. So it's very difficult to convince people that the right scheme is going ahead. So even when it's in construction, people are saying we shouldn't be doing this. And we talked about Metro North. We would be in a better position if that scheme had gone ahead rather than it not going ahead. We're trying to get it delivered now. So I think the one wish would be, let's implement the strategy that everyone thinks is right or as close to being right as we can, and let's just get on and do it. We know people respond to high quality public transport. We've 9% growth there with, as we said, not huge investment. So think what we could do if we implemented the strategy that we planned to do.
Okay, so everyone on board?
Yeah.
Everyone on board. Okay, well, thank you for joining us on board today.
Thank you.